Welcome to the Brain, Music and Learning podcast. Associate Professor Assal Habibi from University of Southern California. And what is your research group's name?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I work at the Brain and Creativity Institute at USC.
That sounds amazing. And you have just been to Lapland.
Yes.
To the Learning and Plasticity meeting. How did you like Lapland? Was it cold?
Well, I'm from Southern California, so it's cold, but a very enjoyable cold and a very enjoyable conference. I was really inspired by the broad topics that in relation to education, in relation to rehabilitation that were discussed, math, dyslexia, aphasia. So it had really a chance of like visiting some of these and a couple of really nice keynotes. And then also the activities of winter activities, which is unique and special for us coming from the warm weather of Los Angeles. So I got to go skiing. I got to go to the sauna and jumping in the cold water.
Did you do that?
I did.
Oh,
I did.
Wow. And how did you feel afterwards?
It feels great afterwards.
Yeah.
And I feel before you just don't think.
Yeah.
You just let that inhibition go.
Yeah, you have to go to a crazy mode in order to do it, especially for the very first time.
Yeah, but no, I really loved the beauty there and the quiet of the nature and this cabin. So I was very happy that that symposium was organized and I was able to participate.
That's great. And I'm sure our listeners are waiting to hear what you talked about in your own talk.
Yeah, so so the symposium was organized by Marie Tarvaneni on engagement with music and the neuroplastic effects across the lifespan. So I talked about my work primarily with children and how music engagement has we've been showing impacting their cognition, their executive function, and their social emotional development. So I work with longitudinal data and cross-sectional data. And it's been really promising for me to see that not only music is joyful, and I think part of our right as humans to practice and enjoy, but it's a really strong means to teach them some of these skills that we want every child to have. We want every child to have impulse control and delayed gratification and ability to plan. And from our results, we've been doing a long-term longitudinal study with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and their youth orchestra program. And delayed gratification and executive function are one of the things that we continue to see improve as a result of music training, which I think is very interesting.
That sounds amazing. And your studies really go with the control groups also. So this is something that we need to have a higher level of the research.
Yeah. Well, we have made as sometimes as difficult as is a point of having in that study with the long-term study with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, we had two control groups, an active control group of children who played sports. And that is not to say sports is better than music. I think child development is wholesome. A child needs music and sports, but we wanted to find an activity that is engaging and group oriented, so we could differentiate music from just an activity that is rewarding. And then we had a passive control group of children who were just doing life as usual, schools, and it's been really nice because some of our results are differences between music, both control, passive control, and active control. So especially findings that are related to language development, auditory perception, changes in the auditory system of the brain is really unique to the music program. And then as we kind of go to more far transfer effects of decision making and planning, there are less differences between music and sports, and then the differences that we see is really between music and passive control. But planning that in a way that had both of these control comparison groups really allowed us to differentiate what is contributing to what effect.
That's really interesting because, of course, we all know about the benefits of sports, know, even for general health, but also for brain health. So this is now going into finer details, looking at what is actually the difference between the music benefits and then the sports benefits. That's very, very interesting. And you were also talking about a new study with the theater control group.
Yeah. So the next logical step of our work was to do a randomized control trial, as challenging that is. So we, in 3 years ago, we were awarded a grant from National Institute of Health, which is kind of the mechanism of funding in the US that allowed us to have the infrastructure to do this RCT study. We recruited a group of 6 to 8 year old children in 2 cohorts. The first cohort had 40 participants. The second cohort had 75 participants. We were combining everybody together. We did a smaller cohort first just to make sure the feasibility of this works. Like if you send 6-year-olds randomly to a music program, do they stick with it? Yeah. Do they continue going? And to our surprise, they did. Over 2 years, so we test them at our center with measures of cognition and social emotional development and executive function, and also brain imaging. And then we assign them randomly to music versus a theater program. They're both local programs, and they get to go for free of charge to these programs 3 times a week. It's a commitment for the parents, especially in Los Angeles, which is distances are far. Parents have to take time off from work to be able to take their kids. There's not always public transportation, but these families have been very dedicated because they see the change in their children. And they're committed from our side to stay in the program for 2 years. And then we look at them post-intervention after 2 years. Over the course of 2 years from the first cohort, we lost 1 child.
Oh, wow. That's really, I mean, almost everyone.
Yeah. And we have because it's a clinical trial, we have a very high degree of fidelity. So we have research staff who are there at each program every day. We document attendance by the minute, so we can later see if there's a relationship between adherence to the intervention and the outcomes. But we can see that they seem to be really enjoying. And then the second cohort we started 2 years ago. These are 75, a larger cohort after we have reassured on feasibility. And they've been, again, the same way they were divided between the 2 groups. And this summer that they will finish, we have analyzed the data, but we haven't unblinded, so we don't know who is who. So hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be able to see the differences between the group. Our primary outcomes are inhibition and decision making as it relates to general impulse control, and I think then things that children later deal, like if you learn impulse control when you're 8 or 9 years old, you probably have an easier time in middle school.
Oh, yes.
Or when things become more complicated in your life, when you have to choose between peer groups, or you have to choose between showing up to class or hanging out at the mall. And I think learning those building blocks earlier in life can have a scaffolding of protection later in life.
Yeah. And we currently live in a world where impulse control is kind of challenged all the time.
Yeah.
Of course, we have so many other things to do that are competing with school, but then also during the free time, we have so many kind of magnets of attention. In the social media, we have all the commercials, and we have so many, even just the news are nowadays, attention capturing and kind of challenging the impulse control. So I think this is a very timely question also.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I walked into the rehearsal of one of these. I'm masked, so I don't know the students, but I kind of like walked in and stand in the back and listening to them playing. And now they are 9 to 10 years old. And for the 2 hours they're practicing and with the conductor, there was so much peace in terms of less distraction, like their ability to sustain their attention. There was no phone, there was no thing on the TV, and I feel like doing so, learning how to have ownership on your attention. They're a much younger generation. I was exposed to social media as an adult, so I still have like some capacity to detach myself. But I think if you are born these days and that's in your life from early on, if you don't have any other means to understand how to manage your attention, that'd be very, very difficult to be successful in anything.
Yes. And noticing your own attention problems is also very frustrating. For example, at school, there's an exam and you know that you know everything, but then you don't have that impulse control, and then the time is up and you notice that you haven't been able to show what you know because of the lack of the impulse control and attention. So this is something that teachers in Finland are talking a lot about. I guess also in the US, the same problems.
Attention, I feel like it's a commodity now. Everybody's after your attention. So to learn how to manage your attention and having that appropriate amount of inhibition and impulse control so you can make better decisions.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And then you also talk about the study with the elderly singers.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, as we saw, a lot of these students that we work with, their grandparents bring them to a music program. And we would see that the grandparents are there, they drop them off, and they just like sit there for the 2 hours and it made us think like, what can we do? Maybe the grandparents or older adults like something like this. So we did a survey and a lot of older adults were interested. And we didn't necessarily recruit from that cohort, but we learned from them that they'd be very interested in a community music engagement. And in the US, we now have this really epidemic of social isolation and loneliness that has become a major problem after COVID, especially for older adults. And that doesn't mean they don't have friends on social media. They may have many, many friends on social media, but they don't interact with another person in real world, in a physical world. So I thought about maybe creating a accessible music engagement program for older adults. And singing came to mind because everybody can sing. Not everybody can sing well, but everybody can sing. If there's happy birthday, everybody kind of joins in and sings a song. So we started these, what we call community choirs at our institute, at the Brain and Creativity Institute. We are very lucky to have a music hall. It's an unusual neuroscience institute, but we like to practice what we preach. So in this music hall that we designed, we have concerts and lectures and sometimes plays, but we also use it as a space for rehearsal for older adults. This was, again, a randomized control trial. Older adults older than 65 were recruited for this study. And they come to us, they have had no prior music background. They're not currently singers in a choir. Maybe they had music lesson at elementary school, but they're not actively musicians. And we divide them into randomly to a choir group versus a control group. That control group we've done a comparison with mindfulness meditation. We have compared it with solo music listening. And in our last trial, we were comparing it with group music listening, like a music appreciation. But over the course of 20 weeks, what I've seen with the choir group has been really amazing. So our main question was that whether singing can help you with speech and noise perception, which is a difficulty that a lot of older adults experience. They tend to not want to be in crowded places or even family function because they have difficulty with speech and noise perception. And we know that musicians are better at speech and noise perception. So our idea was that if we teach them music, whether that helps with their speech and noise perception, and maybe that has kind of an outcome of more social engagement. And I can see the arc of when they first come, nobody wants to sing, nobody feels confident to go on that stage and even test their voice. And you can see that slowly, week after week, they kind of become a group. There's this group bonding at the beginning, because we have like an hour of rehearsal, then there's a coffee break in another hour. And the first 1 or 2 weeks, nobody's talking with anybody. And then you can see that they become each other's friends and they become each other's people. And at the end, when they do a performance, they look like a family. They're like so bonded. And we've seen really interesting results specifically in speech and noise perception. But again, qualitatively, I heard from so many of these older adults after this trial is over of like, I have a voice, I sing with my grandchildren, I sing at family parties now, I'm going to continue working with this group and sing with them. So it's such a, I think from a policy perspective, low investment activity if we create these opportunities with older adults that you don't have to be a professional singer to do it. You can come in and learn how to sing and use repertoires that are interesting and familiar to you, but find that way to connect with another person and kind of like find some solution to that question of loneliness and social isolation.
Yeah. There are people talking about the mirror neuron system kicking in when you are singing together or doing some other rhythmic activity together. So do you think that is part of the reason?
I do think that we definitely see some synchrony among them. And one of my students, Ellen Herschel, has been looking actually at their heart rate variability during the singing sessions and how that relates to their sense of belonging to each other. But I do think that the motor mirror neuron system is a really good candidate to when you have to mimic somebody else.
Oh, yes.
And you have to kind of like mirror, and then it's in a group mirror, you really do synchronize with them. And that probably, I mean, everything we hear from synchronization and entrainment and social behavior is true for this group as well.
You have to synchronize in several levels. If you think about, for example, breathing. So when you are singing, you are breathing not in a random position, but in a certain, patterns and everybody at the same time. Also, when you are moving, you're moving your lips and so on, but also your head and your body according to the music and the expression and so on. So there's so many levels of synchronizing together when you're singing.
And we see them as a group. They look, we always have a performance for them at the end, that they get to bring their family and friends, and the other group also comes, and the choir group performs, and you just see them that this is a group now. They are each other's people, and even their movement, the way they talk, there's like a synchrony.
That's amazing. And that probably also happens in the children's group when they are playing together. And that's a very nice peer group to bond with. Is the people in your orchestra or in your choir.
My next dream project is to do an intergenerational choir.
Oh, wow. We need that. Definitely.
Because I feel like the young people can use the wisdom of older adults, and older adults can use the energy and kind of like the flourishing of a young person, and both of that is missing. So that's in the planning phases.
That sounds amazing. There are so many levels that music can actually benefit, starting from really the very low level of the auditory processing and going all the way to these social aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful to have you in our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.